Chapter 20 of Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar. This recording is in the public domain. Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Chapter 20. Jane Clayton Again a Prisoner. Though her clothes were torn and her hair disheveled, Albert Werper realized that he never before had looked upon such a vision of loveliness as that which Lady Greystoke presented in the relief and joy which she felt in coming so unexpectedly upon a friend and rescuer when hope had seemed so far away. If the Belgian had entertained any doubts as to the woman's knowledge of his part in the perfidious attack upon her home and herself, it was quickly dissipated by the genuine friendliness of her greeting. She told him quickly of all that had befallen her since he had departed from her home, and as she spoke of the death of her husband, her eyes were veiled by the tears which she could not repress. "I am shocked," said Werper in well simulated sympathy, "but I am not surprised. That devil there," and he pointed toward the body of Achmet Zek, "has terrorized the entire country. Your Waziri are either exterminated or have been driven out of their country far to the south. The men of Achmet Zek occupy the plain about your former home. There is neither sanctuary nor escape in that direction. Our only hope lies in traveling northward as rapidly as we may, of coming to the camp of the raiders before the knowledge of Achmet Zek's death reaches those who were left there, and of obtaining through some ruse an escort toward the north. I think that the thing can be accomplished, for I was a guest of the raiders before I knew the nature of the man, and those at the camp are not aware that I turned against him when I discovered his villainy. Come, we will make all possible haste to reach the camp before those who accompanied Achmet Zek upon his last raid have found his body and carried the news of his death to the cutthroats who remained behind. It is our only hope, Lady Greystoke, and you must place your entire faith in me if I am to succeed. Wait for me here a moment while I take from the Arab's body the wallet that he stole from me," and Werper stepped quickly to the dead man's side, and kneeling sought with quick fingers the pouch of jewels. To his consternation there was no sign of them in the garments of Achmet Zek. Rising, he walked back along the trail, searching for some trace of the missing pouch or its contents, but he found nothing, even though he searched carefully the vicinity of his dead horse and for a few paces into the jungle on either side. Puzzled, disappointed, and angry, he at last returned to the girl. "The wallet is gone," he explained crisply, "and I dare not delay longer in search of it. We must reach the camp before the returning raiders." Unsuspicious of the man's true character, Jane Clayton saw nothing peculiar in his plans, or in his specious explanation of his former friendship for the raider, and so she grasped with alacrity the seeming hope for safety which he proffered her, and turning about she set out with Albert Werper toward the hostile camp in which she so lately had been a prisoner. It was late in the afternoon of the second day before they reached their destination, and as they paused upon the edge of the clearing before the gates of the walled village, Werper cautioned the girl to accede to whatever he might suggest by his conversation with the raiders. "I shall tell them," he said, "that I apprehended you after you escaped from the camp, that I took you to Achmet Zek, and that as he was engaged in a stubborn battle with the Waziri, he directed me to return to camp with you, to obtain here a sufficient guard, and to ride north with you as rapidly as possible and dispose of you at the most advantageous terms to a certain slave broker whose name he gave me." Again the girl was deceived by the apparent frankness of the Belgian. She realized that desperate situations required desperate handling, and though she trembled inwardly at the thought of again entering the vile and hideous village of the raiders, she saw no better course than that which her companion had suggested. Calling aloud to those who tended the gates, Werper, grasping Jane Clayton by the arm, walked boldly across the clearing. Those who opened the gates to him permitted their surprise to show clearly in their expressions. That the discredited and hunted lieutenant should be thus returning fearlessly of his own volition seemed to disarm them quite as effectually as his manner toward Lady Greystoke had deceived her. The sentries at the gate returned Werper's salutations and viewed with astonishment the prisoner whom he brought into the village with him. Immediately the Belgian sought the Arab who had been left in charge of the camp during Achmet Zek's absence, and again his boldness disarmed suspicion, and won the acceptance of his false explanation of his return. The fact that he had brought back with him the woman prisoner who had escaped added strength to his claims, and Mohammed Beyd soon found himself fraternizing good-naturedly with the very man whom he would have slain without compunction had he discovered him alone in the jungle a half hour before. Jane Clayton was again confined to the prison hut she had formerly occupied, but as she realized that this was but a part of the deception which she and Frecoult were playing upon the credulous raiders, it was with quite a different sensation that she again entered the vile and filthy interior from that which she had previously experienced when hope was so far away. Once more she was bound and sentries placed before the door of her prison, but before Werper left her he whispered words of cheer into her ear. Then he left and made his way back to the tent of Mohammed Beyd. He had been wondering how long it would be before the raiders who had ridden out with Achmet Zek would return with the murdered body of their chief, and the more he thought upon the matter, the greater his fears became that without accomplices his plan would fail. What, even if he got away from the camp in safety before any returned with the true story of his guilt, of what value would this advantage be other than to protract for a few days his mental torture and his life? These hard riders, familiar with every trail and bypath, would get him long before he could hope to reach the coast. As these thoughts passed through his mind, he entered the tent where Mohammed Beyd sat cross-legged upon a rug, smoking. The Arab looked up as the European came into his presence. "Greetings, O brother," he said. "Greetings," replied Werper. For a while neither spoke further. The Arab was the first to break the silence. "And my master, Achmet Zek, was well when you last saw him?" he asked. "Never was he safer from the sins and dangers of mortality," replied the Belgian. "It is well," said Mohammed Beyd, blowing a little puff of blue smoke straight out before him. Again there was silence for several minutes. "And if he were dead?" asked the Belgian, determined to lead up to the truth and attempt to bribe Mohammed Beyd into his service. The Arab's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his gaze boring straight into the eyes of the Belgian. "I have been thinking much, Werper, since you returned so unexpectedly to the camp of the man whom you had deceived, and who sought you with death in his heart. I have been with Achmet Zek for many years. His own mother never knew him so well as I. He never forgives, much less would he again trust a man who had once betrayed him. That I know. I have thought much, as I said, and the result of my thinking has assured me that Achmet Zek is dead, for otherwise you would never have dared return to his camp, unless you be either a braver man or a bigger fool than I have imagined. And if this evidence of my judgment is not sufficient, I have but just now received from your own lips even more confirmatory witness, for did you not say that Achmet Zek was never more safe from the sins and dangers of mortality? Achmet Zek is dead. You need not deny it. I was not his mother or his mistress, so do not fear that my wailing shall disturb you. Tell me why you have come back here. Tell me what you want. And Werper, if you still possess the jewels of which Achmet Zek told me, there is no reason why you and I should not ride north together and divide the ransom of the white woman and the contents of the pouch you wear about your person, eh?" The evil eyes narrowed. A vicious, thin-lipped smile tortured the villainous face as Mohammed Beyd grinned knowingly into the face of the Belgian. Werper was both relieved and disturbed by the Arab's attitude. The complacency with which he accepted the death of his chief lifted a considerable burden of apprehension from the shoulders of Achmet Zek's assassin, but his demand for a share of the jewels boded ill for Werper when Mohammed Beyd should have learned that the precious stones were no longer in the Belgian's possession. To acknowledge that he had lost the jewels might be to arouse the wrath or suspicion of the Arab to such an extent as would jeopardize his new found chances of escape. His